Okay, hi everyone, welcome to our panel discussion that we're calling Strikes, Your Questions Answered. This is just an opportunity for students to come and ask us some questions about the ongoing industrial action at the moment. Thank you to all our virtual attendees. We are recording this as well, so you'll be able to watch it after the live session. And we're very pleased to welcome two panels to represent the sides of the strikes at the moment. And we'll come on to introduction shortly, but thank you for joining us. It's really great. And it will give us lots of different perspectives on the strike action. And the purpose of this event is to be informative and to sort of have students' questions answered and to give them an opportunity to know a little bit more about what's going on. At the moment, we are just going to give a little bit of background to the strikes before we get started with the Q&A. So today we've got representatives from Unison and UCU. UCU is for Universities and Colleges Union, and they are different trade unions which represent the staff at the university. So Unison represents professional services, so that's people who, for example, work in libraries or help zones, receptions. And we have UCU, which is Universities and Colleges Union, and they represent your academics. And they're both unions representing the staff, but they have slightly different mandates, which means reasons why they're striking. But the commonality is around pay awards. And it's really important that we sort of emphasise that there is a national body which sets out the arrangements for strikes, and pay negotiations for staff are done at a national level. They're not done completely locally. So it's important to understand that this dispute isn't just at UOG. Lots of students are being affected by strikes, and lots of staff all over the country are being disrupted or affected or impacted by strikes. So it's not just us. And we also have representatives from the university executive. So they are the managers of the uni, and they are here to explain what's going on from the university side. That's helpful, but we'll leave more for them to explain when we get into the introductions. Just a little bit of housekeeping. The questions that we've got at the moment have all been sent to us by students, either on our Instagram or to our SU inbox, and we've pre-prepared those. But if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to pop them in the chat, or if you're sitting in a Students' Union space, there should be somebody there to take your questions and they'll get them to me. We are giving panel members a time, so we don't go over, and it'll be roughly a minute for them to answer the question, and then the other side will have a minute to respond. I've already briefed this to the panel, but just for context, when I send the question out, I'll let the panel decide who's going to take the question, and then they'll start giving their answer. And we've got 5 rules, which goes for all of the panel members, and our students. So we've got: please respect each other's opinions and points of view. Please maintain a professional and courteous demeanour throughout the event. Listen attentively to each other's comments and look to answer the questions as they're put. Please avoid any personal attacks or inflammatory language, and note that panel members may not address each other with questions either, and we'll try and keep the questions and students focused as we can. So I'll go on to introductions now. I probably should have introduced myself to start with. So my name's Ellie, and I'm your Education and Community Officer at the Students' Union, and the Students' Union represents the views and rights of students. So that's why I'm here, and I'm always available if you want to chat afterwards. So I'll pass on as I can see people around the screen, and I'll invite Stephen to introduce himself first. Thank you.
Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you very much for joining this session. Thank you to Ellie and Josh for organising it. So I'm Stephen Marston, I'm the Vice Chancellor of the university, and what that means is that essentially I'm the Chief Executive of the organisation. So welcome.
Thank you, Stephen. And Camille?
Hello everyone, I'm Camille Stallard. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at the university, so I have responsibility for finance, planning and estates. and we'll work with Stephen to answer any questions that you're putting to us as the employer.
Thank you, Camille. And Joe?
Good morning, everyone. So yes, my name's Joe Sucksmith. I work at the university within the immigration team, so I give advice and support to international students. But I am also the trade union lead at the university for Unison, which, as Ellie explained earlier, is the trade union that supports professional services staff, mostly the non-academic staff, and obviously we are in dispute alongside UCU.
Thank you, Joe. And Andrew?
Morning, everyone. I'm Andrew Misiura. I'm the University College Union branch chair. I'm a staff member of the university also in the School of Natural, Social and Sports Sciences. And my job in the union essentially is to be the primary contact and coordinator of the union activities.
Lovely, thank you. And Sally Ann, thank you.
I'm a senior lecturer of nursing and a member of the UCU. I don't sit on the board, I'm just a member.
Thank you, that's really helpful, and very nice to meet you, Sally Ann. I haven't met you before, so thank you. Hi. Thank you very much. So we said when we were planning this that we'd give you each an opportunity to sort of outline your position. So if I go to the unions first, that would be great, and whoever would like to take this part of the discussion, please go ahead, and you've got 2 minutes to do that, please.
Okay, thanks very much, Eleanor. So just to explain that this is a national dispute of both academic and professional service staff, and none of us want to be out on strike. The purpose of the strike is to try and get people together to reach agreement. And that's already happening this week. On Monday and Tuesday of this week, the employers' representative and unions were at ACAS, which is the organisation that tries to get everyone together. And there are some, I think, some encouraging early signs from that. Dispute is around pay, yes, but not just pay. It's about workload. It's about the fact that across the sector, there are many people on casualised contracts. And it's also about equality pay gaps and pensions. There are about 150 universities across the country involved, about 70,000 UCU members, and about 2.5 million students potentially affected by the strikes. We have to think about this historically, however, and that is that academic staff and professional service staff have suffered real terms pay cuts of about 25% since 2009. And that means a junior lecturer joining the university now is actually going to be paid less by about £8,500 than they would have done had they not suffered this. That creates a problem for us in recruitment, but it also creates a problem with people not being able to afford to retire as well, because this affects their retirement benefits. It is, I'm afraid, the action of vice-chancellors over that time not prioritising staff working conditions that's stoked this up. Because had we been given at least inflation matching pay awards since 2009, we would not be in this crisis of, I'm afraid, the chief exec's making. Current pay offer for academics is about 5%. Inflation is running over 10%. Workload, about 2 days a week in a UCU survey carried out in 2021 is unpaid, over and above the 5 days that lecturers work.
Thank you, Andrew. Sorry, we're out of time, but thank you. That's very helpful. And I'll invite the other side to give their opinion now. Thank you. Their opinion, their view, sorry, thank you.
Okay. I'll take on the other side, though I hope that actually we're not entirely on opposite sides. We're all trying to do the right thing for the university and for the staff and students who work here. Anyway, 2 points to make just to start off as the university's position. The first is about affordability. The university wants to be a good employer. We want our staff to feel recognised, rewarded, valued for the brilliant job they do. We absolutely sympathise with all of the concerns that they're raising, that the pay award this year, the pay award last year are not at the level of inflation, and therefore household budgets and living standards are being hit. We agree with all of that. We sympathise with all of that. But as an employer, as an organisation, we can only pay what we can afford to pay. Critical bit to understand here is that most of our income in this university comes from you, our students, in the form of tuition fees. Tuition fees were set at £9,000 in 2012. Since then, they've gone up once to the 9,250 you're paying now. That went up in 2017. Apart from that one increase, the fee, which is our main source of income, has been frozen for over 10 years. It's lost at least 25% of its value over that time. So what the universities are facing is essentially income which the government has frozen for a decade, while facing prices that rise every year, including pay. That's the big squeeze for us. We're in a financially impossible situation of rising cost, including pay, and our main source of income has been frozen for a decade. We would love to pay more if our income allowed us to, but it doesn't. So as responsible employers, that has to be a key issue for us. What can we afford? And that's what's driving this dispute.
Thank you, Stephen. Sorry, I feel bad cutting everybody off, just trying to keep it fair, but thank you, that's really helpful. So now we've got a little bit more context on the positions. We can open the floor to questions. Again, if there are students watching this virtually or in spaces, please do send your questions in. We have a list of pre-prepared ones to start with. So I'll take this one to the university to start with. And the question is, will I be refunded for misteaching? So you've got a minute to respond to that, please. Thank you.
That's it's Stephen here. That is not what we're planning to do. And the reason is that we think the most important thing we can do for students is to make good any disruption and loss of learning that you've had in your studies. This is a fast-moving situation where we're tracking and mapping very carefully where are sessions being cancelled, where is learning being lost. At present, it's very clustered. Much of the university, most of our students, I don't think are being affected. Some are, and some are being affected significantly. We need to know where this disruption is happening. We need to know where timetable sessions are being cancelled. And then what we will do with the staff is work out how do we make that good so that the students don't lose learning and the students can still work towards your assessments and your exams in the normal way. If we can do all of that, that seems to us to give the best outcome for students, because you don't lose learning and you can still do your best work in your assessments. That's our starting point.
Thank you, Stephen. That's really helpful. And we can pass over to someone from the trade unions to respond to that if you'd like to. You don't have to, but there's an option there. Sally-Ann, if you're happy to go for it.
Yeah, can I respond to that? As an academic, when I strike, I'm losing that day's pay. And luckily I can afford to lose that day's pay, but many of my colleagues can't, which is why some schools may not be seeing the level of disruption that could otherwise happen. But with students benefiting financially, I would ask, whether the university would consider donating my day's pay to the Student Hardship Fund, which would actually, come some way to improving the situation for those students who are saying, you know, financially we're being hit.
Thank you, Sally Ann. Thanks, Camille. We've actually had that question come through in the chat as well. Would the university consider donating considerable amounts of money saved from the striking staff salaries to the Student Hardship Fund to help students suffering, like many other universities are doing? So we'll give Camille a minute to answer that question. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. And yes, there is a mixed picture across the sector. A number of universities have already said that they will do that. A number of other universities are also looking at the additional costs that they will have to incur for part-time hourly paid staff. So I think as far as the University of Gloucestershire is concerned, we would be happy to look at putting some of that money into student hardship funds, but we also need to ensure that we can utilise any money saved to pay for part-time hourly paid staff where that may be required, in line with what Stephen said earlier about making good the any lost lectures.
Thank you. That's really helpful. We will treat that as a separate question because it did come through on the chat. So if someone from the union has a response to that, we can take that. Thank you. Do you want to respond? No, we can move on to. Oh, go on, Joe. That's fine.
Yeah, so I just understand with this is the should pay deductions go into. Well, only to reiterate from a Unison perspective that we would absolutely support that. I mean, clearly we are talking about a significant sum of money. You're talking about thousands of pounds, and clearly there are different ways of doing that, aren't there? And I'm conscious Camille talks about there being costs associated with it, but there needn't be huge costs associated with it. So I would just reiterate that from a Unison perspective, we would obviously absolutely support that.
Thank you, Joe. That's lovely. This is quite a live topic. We are getting questions coming about that. So it seems we've got some lecturers attending as well. So I guess whilst this is informative for students, lecturers are clearly entitled to their questions. So we've got a question from a member of staff which says, so are part-time hourly paid staff being used as strike breakers? And I'll direct that to the university. Thank you.
No, they're not being used as strike breakers. The issue for us is that the effect of the strike action in cancelling timetabled sessions and teaching sessions disrupts learning for students. So that's the problem we now need to try to fix. How do we repair that disruption so that students can still get all of the support for their learning, meet all of the learning outcomes set for their module and their course, and demonstrate their full achievement in assessments? That's the problem we're now trying to solve. And as Camille's already alluded, there may be various different ways of making good that loss of learning support and learning time. And it will vary from course to course. We'll work through with the heads of schools and the ASLs and the course leaders what is the best thing to do to make good this learning. But one option out of several is to use part-time hourly paid staff. We already make very extensive use of PTHP staffing, and one thing we could do to make up for lost learning is ask PTHP staff to provide additional sessions.
Thank you, Stephen. That's really helpful. Everyone's doing so well to keep in the minute. It's impressive. Thank you. There's another question come through, but I think you've just answered that one. Thank you. And because that was a separate reply, we'll take one more response on this issue and then we'll start a new question, please. Does anyone from the union want to respond any further? Yeah, hi, Sally Ann.
I mean, I will say I'm not sure that everyone understands what the term strike breaker means. It means someone who's taken over the work of someone who's on strike, someone who's willing to cover that work. And if those people weren't allocated to those sessions before, you know, it sounds like they're taking on that work. And it's really important that you realise that that is a way of getting around the inconvenience, I think. Obviously, not speaking. But
thank you. That's great. So thank you very much. And it's really helpful to have staff on this call because it enables us to sort of broaden the perspective. And I just want to make sure that students watching understand that this is informative for them. So keep asking your questions as well. Just go back to the ones that we've submitted. So this one is for trade unions to start with. And the question is, why is my lecturer striking, but my friend's lecturer isn't? Thank you. So whoever would like to take it, maybe Andrew.
Yeah, I'll take this then.
Thank you.
Well, as Sally-Ann has said, there are a variety of reasons why some lecturers will strike and others won't. But one of the most significant factors is whether they can actually afford to strike. And this is a big challenge during any sort of dispute like this. We have many staff for all sorts of reasons. There may be single parents, they may have significant outgo, there might be all sorts of things. People sometimes can be seeing rocketing mortgages. There's all sorts of reasons why people can't afford to strike. You also probably find that some lecturers strike more strategically. That is to say, they choose some days to strike and others not. And that is, they're trying to do their best to support something which they simply don't want to happen, but feel that they have to try and do something towards it. But for others, I said, that just simply won't be affordable.
Thank you, that's helpful. And yeah, Camille, your response?
Sorry. Yes, I mean, I just wanted to also point out to students that not all staff are members of unions and therefore may not want to strike anyway. I'm afraid I don't have the percentages to hand, and if Julianne, our Director of HR, had been here, she would have the percentages to hand, I'm sure. But a fair proportion of both academic and professional services staff are not members of unions and would not want to participate in strike action and have no dispute with the pay award.
Thank you. There are 30 seconds left of your response time, so Stephen, if you want to respond,
okay,
that you can.
Can I just then say that one of the things that makes me so sad about this whole situation is colleagues feeling really torn and feeling they're in an impossible position. Many of them feeling, I want to make a stand. I want to use strike action as a way of signalling my unhappiness, my concern, my anger about what's happening to living standards. On the other hand, I absolutely do not want to disrupt learning for my students. And others again feeling, well, what real impact is strike action going to have anyway? So the whole range of different motivations causing individuals to decide to strike or not to strike. But I just, you know, for students to be aware, as I know you all will be, this is setting up some really difficult personal challenges for many of our colleagues, torn between not striking in order to carry on doing the, you know, supporting students, or striking to make the point that they're really angry about where they are in terms of living standards.
Thank you, Stephen. That's really helpful. So I hope that answers that question if the student is watching. This is another one for the university, and it says, I've lost however many number of hours of teaching, and how will this be made up in the future? So I know you've already touched on trying to make up lost teaching and learning, but how will it be done, keeping in mind that students have jobs, responsibilities? How will you manage to do that? Thank you.
I'm afraid, Ellie, there is no single answer to that, because it will depend on which sessions were lost and how the ground can then be covered. But for example, amongst a range of things that may work in different courses and different circumstances, we can make sure that all of the learning support resources are on Moodle. There may be lab or other workshop sessions that could be led by a technician who isn't on strike. There may be, as we've already touched on, cases where PTHP colleagues could stand in and take that session. There will certainly be discussions between academic managers and the staff concerned about the rescheduling of sessions that have been lost. And we can make use of recordings so that we can have a recording made available for students to watch afterwards if they've got childcare or part-time jobs and they can't attend at the time of a rescheduled session. So which blend will vary from course to course, but there's a range of things that we potentially can do to make up for the lost learning.
Thank you. I'm sure that will put a lot of students' minds at rest at the moment. Thank you. And of course, we're opening this up to a response from Union. So if you have any response, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah. So I think it's important to explain to students that academic staff have something called a workload allocation, which basically, in broadest terms, gives us a percentage of how much work we're doing out of 100%. So staff that take a day's strike action, that time is gone. So that's effectively deleted from their workload. So that reduces their capacity for actually doing any rescheduling. If a member of staff is already 100%, they have no capacity to reschedule effectively. But clearly, if they're less than 100%, there may be some capacity to do that. And I'm sure academic staff would be happy to do that. But it is important to realise that not all of your lecturers will have that capacity simply because of where their workload currently is.
Oh, thank you very much. That's great. That's helpful. So we've got a few more answers and a few more questions in the chat, but I'm just going to go to some of the pre-prepared ones. So this one is for trade unions. I've seen in some of the communications that lecturers will be working to contract. Aren't people always doing this? What does that mean? Thank you.
I can take that one. No, basically our contract says, for example, we're only supposed to teach so many days out of so many weeks. Our contract says we're only supposed to work so many hours. I have colleagues who for months and months have been working evenings and weekends to cover the workload. I had, I think, a 4-week period where I was teaching morning and afternoon. And one of the reasons that working to rule is powerful is because, like other staff across many industries, we go above and beyond so often. And that has a massive impact on our lives. But it also means that the university doesn't have to employ someone else to do the additional work we're doing. And I want to stress that my working conditions are your learning conditions. If I am teaching every day, my chance to prepare quality material to deliver is reduced. If I'm marking evenings and weekends, my chance to provide quality feedback is reduced, because if you're tired, you just can't do the quality level of work you want to do. And for me, it is less about my money. It's about my colleagues' money who can afford to strike. But it is about the fact that I can't deliver the quality of work I want to do. I can't be there for my students in the way I want to. And I've kind of lost the question. So
that's all right. Thank you, Sally Ann. That's helpful and really clear. So we'll have a response from the uni. So Stephen, do you have 1 minute? Thank you.
Great. Just say I agree with a lot of what Sally Ann has just said. We're fortunate in this university to have staff who are hugely committed, absolutely want to do their best for their students, for their research subjects, for the community, and do work over and above. Absolutely they do. As Andrew's already mentioned, we have a workload allocation model, which is our way of trying to ensure that colleagues don't get overloaded. And part of this dispute, actually, one of the components, particularly from the UCU, is a national concern about workloads and how we can ensure that university staff have manageable workloads. I would never want to suggest that that would mean no one should work more than their contracted hours if professionally that's what they choose to do. But I absolutely accept we should not be putting people in a position where they are obliged to work more than their contract requires.
Thank you. Again, good timing. Thank you very much. So another one pre-prepared. There are some in the chat, so I will come back to them. There's another one pre-prepared which says, why am I unable to see my PowerPoints or reading on the Moodle? I think just to go back to the idea of working to contract, this is probably quite helpful. And you did touch a little bit on this earlier, Stephen, but from both sides, it'd be helpful to hear why that's the case. So I'll take it to the uni first, if you don't mind, and then we'll get a response. Thank you.
Except I'm not sure what would have happened in that individual case. There's an ongoing issue which isn't directly about strike action, about all sessions being recorded and then put up for students on Moodle so that they can watch again. Helps revision and to consolidate the learning. The vast majority of our colleagues are comfortable with that. Some are not, for fear that it might discourage students from thinking it's worth attending the taught session at all. So there's one set of debates that's going on, has been going on for a long time, about recording all sessions and putting it up on Moodle. There's then a very specific issue in the strike action about, I think, UCU suggesting that staff could take down from Moodle learning materials that are designed to support teaching. If we're trying to keep track of whether that is happening through tracking what's going on Moodle, if that is what is happening, that will become part of the discussion about making good lost learning. How do we get those learning resources back up again and available for students?
Thank you, that's great. And Sally Ann, I'll go to you. Thank you.
So as a lecturer, when I'm preparing my work, I make sure that you might have additional resources there, links or YouTube videos and little extra bits that you might be able to use. But that takes my time, and doing a recording of a session is great. And I wholeheartedly do that for almost every one of my lectures, and I put it up because students need revision material as well. However, if I'm teaching a session next week, and there are recordings of me giving that session before, I don't believe that recording should be available to the university to use in lieu of my labour, because for two reasons. One is my strike impact is lessened. And if I'm losing money every day and inconveniencing my brilliant students, I don't want that to be lessened. And the other thing is the student doesn't get the quality of experience if it's a recorded lecture of one I've done before. I teach some complicated topics like pharmacology, and that's a topic where questions are really important. The ability to have your questions answered are really important. And so again, the quality of your studies are impacted there. And I don't want that. I wouldn't be doing this job if I wanted you not to have a quality time. That's a convoluted sentence, but I hope you get the gist.
Thank you. It's great. So I'll come back to the ones in the chat, like I said before. So again, this is to the university. What happens if I have an exam on a strike day? What do I do? So I'll direct that to the uni to start with. Thank you.
Our colleagues in the academic registry are keeping a very, very careful eye on this. We moved during COVID to being able to run our exams online. So technically, it's entirely possible that we can continue to run exams online so long as the exam paper has all been prepared and loaded up on a non-strike day, and then the examination marking is done after the strike day. You know, so you can see circumstances in which even if your exam is on a strike day, it can still go ahead because it's all now done online. But we don't know that yet. This is kind of still a rather hypothetical situation. So what I can say is assume that your exam will go ahead. We will do our very best to make sure that it can go ahead using the online technologies that we've got. But if for any reason it turns out that it can't, this will be part of the whole making good principle, and we'll have to rearrange and reorganise as best we can. But please assume your exam will go ahead on the date that you've been notified.
Thank you. That's really going to be useful for a lot of students. We get that question a lot. And of course, offering response now. So if anyone has a response from the unions, that'd be great.
I'll do a quick one.
Thank you.
From a lecturer point of view, this is one of the things we struggle with, is choosing when to strike and when to not. I know that a colleague of mine, they had an assessment the other day and she chose not to strike on that day because she knew those students were really going to be impacted. And we really have to question our consciences when we choose to strike. I had to strike and missed a graduation day last year. And I literally cried. So we have to pick when we strike and be aware that if you are missing an assessment because your lecturer is on strike, they haven't made that decision lightly at all.
Thank you. Good to have clarification around that. Great, thank you. So we've just had a question come through on the chat, which if the person is still watching, I think we might have already had it answered. They've said, what are the university doing in regards to the debt that students are getting into for untaught lessons? If the panel feels like they've already answered that, we can come back to it. You feel like, is that unanimous? Do you feel like we've answered that one? Yeah. Okay, lovely. If the student wants it to be reiterated, just pop it in the chat and we can come back to it. So we've had another one come through which says, how can I urge the university to resolve the situation and end the strikes? And that's to go to unions to start with, please.
I think the important thing here is that the unions are very aware of the constraints that the Vice-Chancellor's already referred to in terms of fixed fee rates. But we're also aware that Vice-Chancellors make choices. And therefore, the way in which this strike is going to be resolved is for everyone to keep talking and to be sensible about those talks, given the pressures that both sides are feeling. And my sense of this is that we can see where pay talks are landing in the sector, both in the wider public sector and also in the private sector. And that gives us some sort of areas to work towards, I think, which is a little bit beyond what we're being offered at the moment, but not perhaps as high as the trade unions are demanding. And so I think everyone is prepared to compromise here, but it is about both sides being prepared to do that.
Lovely. And a response from the uni, Stephen? Thank you.
I think Andrew puts it very well. Please be assured you don't need to urge me to take this situation seriously and try to find a way through. I kind of get that. I would love to find a way through, but we are bound by the national negotiating position. We choose to be members of USEA, and once the national pay award is decided, that's what we have to implement. Please bear in mind also that point about affordability, that the national pay award is always going to be driven by what the universities collectively can afford. Please do not be misled by anything you might have read in the media about universities sitting on £40 billion worth of reserves we could easily access. There are a small number of very, very wealthy universities who could afford to pay a lot more. We are not one of them. We do not have big reserves to draw on. We have to manage our income and our expenditure very tightly every year. And so affordability is a big issue for us. So we can carry on negotiating. We will carry on negotiating. Actually, both sides are in discussions mediated by ACAS now. It's going on as we speak. We all want to get a solution to this, but the universities will have to continue to have regard to affordability.
Thank you, Stephen. That's great. So we just had a really useful question come through, which says, will students that have been affected by strike action be able to apply for extensions with strikes as evidence? It's especially important for final year students with dissertations to write. We'll go to the academics first on that one. The trade unions on that one first, and then to the university.
I think that would probably be me.
Yes, of course, Diane, thank you.
So I have been a personal tutor to many, particularly dissertation students, and it's a stressful enough time in your life without other things going on. Please, apology for the doorbell. So I would definitely, as a personal tutor, be supporting. And I hope that the university would be welcoming any extensions the student needs to lessen that stressful period, to make it a little easier. I mean, we're all living through a cost of living crisis, a pandemic, and possibly World War III. So, you know, anything we can do to lessen people's stress is a good thing right now.
Very helpful. Thank you, Sally Ann. Stephen, come back to you for 1 minute. Thank you.
And I think we can give a positive answer to that. Indeed, I think if you look in the frequently asked questions brief, that one is addressed, and we do say that, you know, if as a student you feel your studies have been materially disrupted by strike action, yes, you will be able to put in an application for an extension.
Great, thank you. So for students that are watching this or watching this back later, you can get your extensions through your student records or the My Help thing, the My Help tile thing, My Help tile on MyGloss, or speak to your tutors about how to access those. So it's good to hear that from both sides for students. So thank you for addressing that one. And then we've just had another one come through which says, when will the strikes end and will this happen again next year? So we'll go to unions first on that one. Thank you. Joe or Andrew, do you want to take it? But you can decide between you.
So the question again was, when will the strikes end? Will we have this next year? Yeah.
Yes. Correct,
so clearly the hope, I think, of everybody is they will end, and we won't have them next year. That would be lovely. But clearly there is an iterative process each year, and there are negotiations each year around what changes should be made for that given year. So we can't speak to next year necessarily, but clearly the hope is that we won't get into the level of severity that we've got into this year. As Stephen's already mentioned, there are talks ongoing today. I think it's certainly true from a Unison perspective that we're hopeful. There's a bit of a glimmer of hope there that there might be something coming from the talks today that can be put back to relevant membership. So the hope is that there will be something that can allow us to stand down that action. But I would stress that there does need to be significant movement from the management side, from the university side. It's been mentioned that pay is the headline, and pay is really important. for all the reasons mentioned, all of those real terms pay cuts that staff have suffered for many, many years. But there are lots of other non-pay elements as well, and we need to see movement on some of this stuff in order for our members to ultimately accept that. So I think that the hope is that yes, it will be resolved soon, and that we won't be doing this next year.
Thank you, Joe. And we'll go back to the university for a 1-minute response. Thank you.
I agree there is a hope. Negotiations continue, and as Joe has said, this isn't just about pay, although I think we all recognise that's the most important issue in this. There are other issues about contracts and workloads and working conditions where I do believe there is plenty of ground for constructive, positive discussion about how to make the whole working environment better. So yes, we can have hope. I don't want then to put too much of a downer on it, but the second part of the question is kind of, and is this going to keep happening in future years? The underlying problem here, as I tried to explain earlier, is that the whole university funding system does not work. Frozen main income, with no prospect that the government is going to allow fees to rise, and therefore with no prospect that universities like ours are going to be able to get increased income that allows us to pay awards in future years at the level that our staff will expect and want. We really have to work together to get the government to understand that problem and work towards a more effective overall university funding system before we can be fully confident that we're not going to get into this type of dispute year after year after year.
Thank you. That's great. So I hope that offers any clarification to students that there are negotiations to try not to carry on with this, and it's really important to know that disruptions to students is a byproduct of strike action, not the intention. It's never an intention to disrupt students, and everybody sitting in this room is here to support you. So just keep that at the front of your minds, and thank you for asking all your questions. We just had a really helpful question come in which said, what support are the university offering for students with additional needs where lectures are being cancelled? It can cause significant distress. So I think, and this has come through a few times, just students with particular provision, or they have additional sessions to support them. How is that being looked after, and what sort of soft landing are students having when their support might not necessarily be there? And we'll go to the uni first for that one, please.
Okay, I think that is part of the ongoing support from student services and welfare and disability in working with those students. Again, because there is no consistent pattern in what's happening across the university, we'll only be able to work this out sort of case by case. For an individual student, what disruption have they faced, and therefore what support then needs to be put into place? So far as I know, most students as things stand are not having their learning directly disrupted by strike action, but some are, and significantly. So if you're one of those students, I think keep working with student services and welfare about the support that you will need. But this is going to have to be done, I think, case by case. I don't think there's any sort of general rule we're going to be able to apply.
Thank you. And we'll take the union perspective on that, Sally-Ann.
Yeah, I can pick that one up. You know, I've got students with additional needs who find that rapid change really distressing. Be assured there are other colleagues around as well. So if we're not turning up to lectures, there will be other academics who are not striking, who you can go and talk to. And we've got the brilliant help zone guys as well. So lean into that, as Stephen said. They're really skilled at support. You know, I've taken students down there myself and walked them down there. So lean into the support you do have, and then talk to the academic you specifically wanted when they return. Because, like I said, we're not taking this decision lightly. It is a really tough decision to make because we care about your well-being. So it's really hard going to do that, and we really feel for you. I'm really sorry that that's difficult.
Thank you, Sally Ann, and thank you for that very human response as well. That's really helpful. We've had a question in the chat directed at the Students' Union, actually, so if you don't mind, I'll take chair's privilege and answer that one. So they've asked, why haven't the Students' Union come out and publicly supported the strikes like many other students' unions across the country? Or have I missed this? So you maybe might have missed it. We have made the decision to support the strike action, and the way that we came up with that decision is we consulted our student leaders. So we spoke with our network leads, and they are representatives of all different types of students across the university. We outlined the position as it was in November, and we tried to explain why lecturers and professional services staff were striking. And we kind of gave a balanced view as much as we could and discussed some resources that students could go to, and then we put it to a vote. And those students who are representative of the student body came to the consensus that we should support the strike action. And the way in which students wish to support that is up to them. They could join the picket if they wanted to. They could email the Vice-Chancellor and sort of make their point known. They could write letters, and that sort of ability to support a strike is within your right as a student. You have the right to express your opinion. And there's a statement on our website of how you might want to, if you want to know a little bit more about it. And it's just important that students have the right information. We're never going to say that all students therefore must support the strikes, but we're open to having conversations with students about this. And we are a much smaller union than other unions, so we're always sort of trying to update as much as we can. There's some stuff on Instagram as well if you're interested, and you're always welcome to come and chat to us, but do look at our website about that. And we've just got some comments about that being publicly supported. We've just put a statement on our website of the extent to which we support the strike, so I hope that helps you answer that question. Okay, so just coming through all the questions now. Sorry, there's lots coming through at the moment. So yeah, okay, so we've got a bit of a broad question, and we'll go to the unions first to this one, which is, in a nutshell, so we'll keep to the 1 minute very strictly here, what are the strikes trying to achieve? Andrew, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, we're trying to achieve a long-term solution to this so that we don't have to keep coming back here year after year. The basis of it should be that Vice-Chancellors pay staff at least inflation pay rises. That's fundamentally one thing. The rest of it is about making sure they don't use casualised contracts, make sure that they appreciate the impact this has on recruitment and on staff pensions going forward, and make sure that things like the equality pay gap is addressed. And that's it.
Super, that was like 23 seconds. That's amazing. We'll come to the university. Thank you.
It's actually a really interesting question, because for me, there's a real question about, so what impact do you actually believe strike action is going to have beyond disruption to students, which is causing the stress and the worry and the fear that we've been talking about today? The strike action of itself does not give the universities any more money to pay a higher pay award. We really should be focusing in, all of us, in partnership and together towards the government, to say the only long-term solution here is if we can all work together so that the universities can get sufficient increases in income to pay the sort of pay award we would all like to pay. That's not where we are now. And so kind of there's something for me a bit counterintuitive about strike action against your employer, the individual university, where the university simply is not in a position to say, OK, we get it, we'll change, we'll pay you an inflation plus pay award. We can't do that. What I think actually the strike action is doing is more in the area Sally Ann was talking about. It's an expression of concern, anger, solidarity that what's going on to academic staff across the university sector is not right, and we want to make a stand, and we want to make that clear that that's our opinion. I think actually that's what much of the strike action is doing, and why many of our colleagues are taking strike action, because it's the only statement that they can currently make. And I absolutely get that. I get why people are feeling so cross and so wound up that they think, well, this is the only way I can make a stand. But in terms of its actual effect in resolving anything long term, that's a very different question.
Thank you. That is a difficult, and it was a good question. It was a very short question from a student, but a very good question. And if students would like to pursue that question further, please just comment in the chat. I'm trying to get through as many as I can. We've actually had lots of questions, which is great. I'm going to combine two questions, if I may. And someone has said that the lecturers for my course say that the aim is to cause maximum disruption so that we will complain and it leads to change. And it's only leading to frustration due to a lack of understanding what's going on. And then separately, another student said, who do we complain to about the disruption, and who is there for them to support students throughout this frustration? So I think this is harking back to the comment that we made about disruption being a byproduct, but clearly it might cause complaint from students. So they're asking, who do we complain to if we need to, and why is disruption like the biggest thing why is disruption the biggest thing needed to make change? So we'll go to the unions first on that one, if I may. Are you happy for Sally Ann to take it?
Okay, so the only pressure I can put on employer, and the same for you when you go out into the workforce, is my labour. My labour is the only thing I have, and withdrawing that labour is the only way I have of putting pressure. And as Stephen says, it's not just the university, it's also the system the university is in. If we don't take action, the university also can't say to the government, look, you're making this unsustainable. And so labour is the only thing I have to withdraw. We've all academics raised our work levels, and for me it's about work level, it's about quality, it's about the student experience. My daughter's a student at this university, and we want it to be better. We all want to do better quality work. What was the second part of that question? Lack of understanding. If you're unsure about why your lecturers are striking, you can talk to that lecturer. You can come down and see us on the picket. You can come and talk to me outside of Oxford. I've been there quite a lot. And we're not picketing for fun. Believe me, it's not a fun experience. So if you're not understanding, if you're not sure, come and ask us, come and talk to us. We're absolutely willing to do that. For me, it's about the quality of experience. And I just can't do that. I've not been able to do that for a while. I've not been able to help my students in the way I want to. And I'm very, very tired and sad about that.
Thank you, Sally Ann. So we'll go to the university just for the question about who do students go to if they want to complain.
Well, I mean, you can always come to me to complain. You will find quite a lot of information and explanations and FAQs now on the MyGloss website. But please hear the point that I'm very, very sympathetic both to the action staff are taking and to the concerns it's causing for students about disruption. There's only so much I can do. The I was actually a bit upset to hear, Ellie, what you said about the way the first student phrased it, that they were being encouraged to maximise disruption, because I think what we've also been hearing throughout this session is that's causing real worry and stress for students. And actually, I think most of our colleagues, the vast majority of our colleagues, are in the same position as Sally Ann, not wanting to maximise disruption for students. On the contrary, still wanting to try to help students at the same time as taking a stand and making their views clear and sort of kicking the employer as much as they can. And both things are true, but this is absolutely not about, I believe, maximising the disruption for students. And then when we know exactly who has been disrupted and how, what the university will try to do is make up that lost learning, as we were talking about earlier.
Thank you, that's helpful. Yes, and it is sad to hear that students are being told that it's meant to be disruptive. Of course it is. So thank you for expressing that. Again, it's nice to see a human side of this, actually, so thank you. Okay, so the next question is, if you know what the problem is, why aren't we talking to local politicians to actively try and make change? Why aren't the university talking to local politicians? If I may, I'll just jump in on this one very quickly from a students' union point of view. So the liaising and communication with local politicians is something that everyone sitting on this panel has capacity to do, and we do constantly pester our MPs for various things, and sometimes it's to do with cost of living, sometimes it's to do with access to resources, all sorts of things. So those sorts of things are happening, and as has been spoken about on the panel, pay negotiations are national, and it's good that students are coming. Like, we've just got loads of comments actually about it being about speaking to politicians. So it is happening, and if you feel strongly about this pay negotiation and wanting working and learning conditions to be better, please actively campaign as a student. You can come via us, or you are absolutely entitled to email your local MP. So for Cheltenham it's Alex Chalk, and for Gloucester it's Richard Graham. So please do that, and come and speak to us if you'd like a template. But we'll go to the panel for this one. So firstly, are you, and if not, why aren't you speaking with local MPs about the change? And we'll go to unions first on this one, please. Thank you. Joe, happy for you, or Andrew, whoever you'd prefer.
Sure, I can come in. I mean, I think again from a Unison perspective, there is political lobbying and discussions going on with MPs, including the local ones. So our regional office will be doing a lot of that. We've done some of it. I think it's probably also fair to say there is an element of doubt, maybe, that our local politician will be entirely receptive to a lot of our arguments. But I'm not sure I daren't enter the political realm. Clearly but I suppose the answer to the question is we are doing all we possibly can as a trade union to talk to politicians, local, national, at all levels, to try and achieve what we're trying to achieve, which is a resolution to this dispute. It would be helpful if we had politicians who were more receptive, and maybe we can do that by kicking some of them out at the next general election.
Thank you, Joe. Would you like a response for that one from the uni?
Fine. I will not make any party political comment. I can assure you I have regular discussions with our two local MPs, Richard Graham for Gloucester, Alex Chalk for Cheltenham. They are very well aware both of the strike action and its causes and consequences, and also of the wider funding challenge that I've described. They're well aware of that. The pushback that we get has a number of components. One is but UCU are saying that universities have £40 billion of reserves and can easily afford it, so don't come to the government. Keep going at your universities to open up their bank accounts. We do not have those reserves. So it's really unfortunate, actually, that the impression is being given that this doesn't need to be a government issue because the universities could easily afford it. We can't afford it. So that's one area of pushback. Second area of pushback is that you will have seen that the government across the whole labour market and the whole economy is actually saying we do not want pay awards at inflation plus levels. We're seeing strike action in many different sectors, and consistently the government is saying if we're to get inflation back down again, tackle the inflation problem, we can't afford pay awards that match inflation, because otherwise you just get into a never-ending loop of pay going up, so prices go up, so inflation goes up, and you can never get out of it. So actually, a second part of the government position is we actively do not want employers anywhere in the economy paying at inflation plus levels. Third bit is to solve the underlying financial problem for universities does mean looking again at the whole fees and funding situation. And there is no political gain for any party in putting up student fees, because as students, you don't want your fees to go up. Problem for us is that that's our main form of income. So if we're ever to earn more income in the current system, it's going to have to come through fees. But the government is saying students don't want their fees to go up. So there are several different pushbacks before you will ever get an MP or a politician to accept the case for higher pay in universities.
Thank you, that's great. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time. We've got about 10 minutes left, I think. So I think this might have just been touched on, but it's still interesting to know. Someone said the sector has over £40 billion of reserves. Whether much of this sits with UAG, I don't know. Whilst the government could help by changing the funding model, the volume of cash here suggests there is funding available for varying pay increases. What are your thoughts on that? I'll go to Camille first, because you were quick with your hand, so go for it.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, the sector is very diverse. There are many universities that have lots and lots of cash, but not the area of the sector that we operate in. And we have to be very prudent in the way we manage our annual finances. So even if we did have some cash available, we need to manage our budget on an annual basis so that we can cover our costs. For the current year, we were budgeting for a surplus of 3%, and we need to generate that surplus to invest in equipment and other facilities for students. But actually that position has deteriorated, and we're now forecasting that we'll only just make less than a 2%, about 1.5% surplus. So we're not a university that has much that we can fall back on, and we do need to make sure that each year we keep our income and expenditure in line. The offer that UCIA has put on the table for the 23-24 pay award will cost us an additional £4 million. That is sadly, we will have to manage that cost somehow, even though, as Stephen's already said, our unit of resource is eroding each year, but we simply can't afford any more than that.
Thank you. And a response from Union, so 1 minute, thank you. Joe?
Sorry, Sally, okay, I'll take it then. I'm just looking at the comment, obviously, just to deal with the last bit. The strikes are working, you see here at the negotiating table, which probably would never have happened without the strikes. I think that bit is definitely true. So I think there is an element of acknowledging that actually, there has been some progress, partly because we've taken this action, and it's regrettable that we've had to take that action, but it has unfortunately forced the employers back to the negotiating table. But in terms of this reserves issue, I think we do acknowledge as trade unions that the position is different across the country, that certain institutions do have a lot more reserves than others, and we're certainly not a university that has loads of reserves in the way that some others do. We do acknowledge that. At the same time, there is some disagreement, I think, around how far we can go with these pay awards. So it's certainly our view, looking at the relevant financials, that we can go further than is on the table at the moment. And I think one thing that's really important to understand here is that, and I sort of put this in with some level of trepidation. We spend an awful lot of money on other things like buildings, for example. We pour millions and millions, literally millions and millions, into buildings. We're doing it now with the city campus. And whatever the merits of that project, generally, we seem to be able to find the money when it's for building projects. We ought therefore to be able to find the money to pay staff fairly. It's a bit. I know the university will take some issue with that framing, but the reality is that there is lots of money there, and we can make choices. We can prioritise differently, and I think that's what we're pushing for. Sorry, thanks.
Thank you. No, that's okay. Sorry, everyone's doing so well with the timing. I'm being lenient, but yes, thank you. So maybe following on quite neatly in the comments, I usually consider my pay to be fair and reasonable, but when it falls behind the cost of living, it rapidly becomes unfair. I exchange my labour for money. This is clearly from a lecturer that I can then exchange for goods and services. I can no longer exchange my labour for the same goods and services. Why does UAG consider this as fair? So we'll go to the uni to start with. Thank you.
In a sense, Ellie, as I said earlier, the university doesn't consider that fair. We have absolutely no wish, interest or desire for our highly valued members of staff to face erosion in their living standards year after year after year. Of course we don't want that. So I agree that's not fair. And then you have to look at the situation that we're actually in this year and the funding challenges that we're facing that Camille has just described. With the best will in the world, as chief executive of the organisation, I have to manage our budgets in a way that keeps us solvent, and I can't afford to pay at the level of inflation plus. That's the catch-22, the devil in the dark blue sea, the rock and a hard place situation we're in. So I absolutely sympathise. I cannot afford a pay award at the level that's being requested.
Thank you. And a response from the union, and then we'll do one more question, two more questions, and then we'll have to bring it to a close. So one more response for 1 minute.
Okay.
Hi, Andrew.
Well, it absolutely isn't fair, and it isn't fair because, as has been indicated, this is also about choices. I mean, we must not let anybody get away by suggesting it isn't. We must give priority to our human resources. The most valuable asset for students is the quality of their lecturing and support experience, their professional service staff experience and their academic staff experience. And that means giving those staff the working conditions that will mean that they're not stressed out their mind, that they're not taking time off with work-related stress, that they are able to go the extra mile because they've actually got the conditions that allow them to do that. And that isn't just about pay, but that pay is an element, because in their life, if they're stressed out paying their bills in their life, that also has an impact on how they are at work. So we are just as frustrated with this. We want the students to have the best possible learning conditions, but until human resources start being properly prioritised, that won't happen.
Thank you, and great timing again. That's great. So I'm just looking through the questions that we've had submitted already. I think we've covered most of them. So if there are any more questions from the room that people that are attending at the moment, please put them in the chat. And I just have one come through on Teams from a colleague who's got a student live in the room. So they've said, Why has it taken lecturers to strike for the university to listen? And then tell us that in a nutshell, it's just a case of lobbying the government. I think we have covered quite a lot of this already. I think we've come to the realization now that there is such a tension between the government as well. And clearly, like, because this is national, it's much bigger than just sitting in this room and saying, well, we want more money. So, like, why is it that it gets to strike level action? And I'll go to the unions first, please. Andrew, who wants to take it?
Yeah, okay, I'll take it. I think it's been said many times here in this session that nobody wants it to get to strike level. We have to bear in mind that this has been a chronic situation going on for many years. This is something which, had we not been facing one of the highest inflation rates in our living history, we probably wouldn't even be in this particular crisis. It is because we've got an accumulated effect of staff's working conditions slowly being eroded over many, many years, and at least since 2009. And that means their pay going down. It means there are other conditions of service as well. That's why we're here.
Thank you, Andrew. And final response from Stephen. Thank you.
I agree with Andrew, actually. This has been building up for many years. Nobody wants to be in this situation. We're all struggling to find a way out of it, as we were talking about earlier. But it is a function of this ongoing financial squeeze on the university system from a decade of frozen fees. So our income simply has not kept pace with inflation. So Andrew rightly says the pay of staff has not kept pace with inflation, nor has the income of universities, and the two go together. They are directly linked.
Thank you, that's really helpful. So we've just had one final question come in now, so we'll give each side 1 minute to answer this one, and then we'll draw it to a close. So the question is, the university can't afford to hire new staff. The university can't afford to pay the staff they currently have. What is it going to take for the university to sort its finances out? You say students are at the centre of what you do. Can you prove it? That's a really big question to finish on. So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, like remaining completely neutral. So I'll go to the university to start with, please. Thank you. Yeah, Camille, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to feel, I mean, clearly it's my job. I do feel that the university is managing its finances as well as it can in the environment that we're being forced to operate in. So this is not a free market where we can charge, what we want and earn the money that we think we're due. It's a capped fee regime, and the government is controlling that. So we are making the best of what we've got. And that does mean that each year we are having to cut our cloth accordingly, which is not the position we would want to be in. And absolutely, we are prioritising the student experience, but we do have to make some difficult decisions each year on that point. And until such time as either the fee rate changes or government gives grants to universities to supplement the fees, we're going to be in this position. And pay rises, I know Andrew's talked about the particularly high inflation we've got at the moment. I imagine next year it will be, well, hopefully next year it will be slightly lower, but this issue is not just going to be resolved with this pay negotiation round.
Thank you, Camille. That does help. So we'll go for one final response from the union, and then we'll go to a close. So thank you. I don't know who would like to take it. Sally-Ann, yeah, by all means.
I can take that one. I mean, in my budget, for me, if I don't have the funds to do something, I can't do it. And absolutely that's reasonable. However, in September, I'll be working in City Campus. And I'm now looking at my budget and trying to work out how I'll pay the £6 a day for parking there when parking at Oxford is marginally cheaper. And I'm going to have to cut something from my budget to manage that. But if that's not trickling down from my employer, I also have to look at my options in the free market that is labour. And if my employer also can't employ sufficient staff to cover my workload, then members of our staff are working excessive hours to cover that gap. If, for example, 5 members of staff give an extra day's worth of work, that's a whole member of staff that they are covering the university for. And I jokingly asked my manager last year whether I could have the extra money for covering that member of staff, and she said, ho, ho, no. And I said, I'm serious. I'm actually serious. And so I can't see the university's budget. I'm a lowly academic. But if I don't have the money to do something, I don't do it because I don't have the money. I don't go out and buy a new house, for example, if I don't have the money for it. I don't build a new building. I prioritise my bills. I prioritise gas, electric, food. And that's what all of the staff are trying to do in this is say, we can't manage on this income, but we also can't manage to do our jobs with the time we've got and the staffing we've got. And that's, for me, the biggest pressure is saying, I can't do the quality of work I want to do. I can't give the students the time I want to do.
Thank you, Sally-Ann. So we are out of time. Thank you all so much for your input today and for answering some quite challenging questions. For students watching, I really hope this has been helpful. If you have any further questions, you can get in touch with us at the Students' Union. You can email me specifically, which is ehill8@glos.ac.uk. And by all means, just keep sending in questions. We can direct them where they need to go. There are FAQs available on my Gloss, and there is a statement, like we said earlier, from the Students' Union on our website. So do get in touch, and thank you very much for watching, and thank you to the panel for giving up their time today and for being so helpful with your answers and keeping them really focused to students. So thank you very much, everyone, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon. Thank you.